Hey, I'm Jon Gordon. I'm here with Positive University, and I'm here with Erwin McManus right now. Erwin is someone who's been a huge influence in my life. I don't talk about this often when I speak to business and sports teams, but Erwin's a pastor. Many years ago, he was giving a talk, Why I Follow Jesus. It spoke to me so much. It just had a huge impact on my life. My life has never been the same. So to be able to talk to him now about his new book and about his life just means so much to me. It started out with me just listening to him on a podcast, and then we became friends, and now we're like family. So Erwin, we've known each other a long time. I just want to say thanks for taking this time to talk to me and about your book.
John, man, this is so much fun. I've never done Zoom before, so you're introducing me into a new world, but that's not unlike you. Thank you so much.
Well, Zoom's like Skype, but it's supposed to have better connection. So let's hope we have this on this video call. So, let's dive right in. Let's talk about this book, The Last Arrow. I mean, I love this book. People are loving this book. I was just at a conference. 3 people came up to me and said that they're reading this, that they love it. Why did you write The Last Arrow? Tell people what it's about at its core.
Sure. Well, I've been writing books for probably almost 20 years now, and I always write around something that's significant and real in my own life. And I wrote this book because, having now lived almost 60 years, I've seen so many people live beneath their potential, not by my assessment, but by their own, filled with so much regret, a sense that they missed the life they were created to live. And I began noticing that there were really clear characteristics of people who live a life beyond the expectations of others, beyond what appears to be their talent and ability. And then there are so many people with so much talent and ability who live so beneath the life they were created to live. And I want to write a book that teaches people how to never settle, how to live a life without regret. And so The Last Arrow is really a book that I hope someone will read in their 20s and 30s, not as much in their 50s and 60s, that says, look, take these principles, because these are the ones that will help you live your life in a way that when you look back, you will know you lived the life you were created to live.
How do we do it? Like, where do we start?
Well, even though I just said the disclaimer, but I hope they read when they're young, I'm 59, and so I want to say it's never too late. And I think the starting point is to not let your past steal from you your future. I don't care if you're 19 or 29 or 49 or 59 or 69. You cannot allow your past to determine your future. And we have to realize that our past will be our future unless we have the courage to create a different one.
How do we let go of the past? How do we let go of it since it is so powerful for so many people?
Have you ever noticed that the part of the past that sticks to us is all the negative stuff? We seem to lose all the hope and inspiration and of the past, and it just sort of washes away really quick. But we hold on to the bitterness, we hold on to the failures, we hold on to the hurt. And so it seems to me that the past does not hold on to us in an equitable way. I wish that all of our successes, all the affirmations, all the inspiration, all the moments where we showed courage and we were heroic and we overcame a failure, I wish those things in our past stayed with us, because those are the things we need to take into the future. So I think we need to realize that we don't really remember, we don't really have a history, we have a memory. And that you lived your life, but your life is not the sum total of what you've lived. Your sum total is, your life is the sum total of what you've learned from what you've lived. And if you've taken from what you've lived bitterness or fear or regret or insignificance, it's going to cripple your future. But if you've taken from it, I can overcome failure. There's no wounds that I cannot be healed from. I found the courage to overcome. Then you've really built yourself for the future.
Talk about The Last Arrow. What's the symbolism there, and why did you choose that as the title?
Well, when I was in college, it's kind of funny because I went to the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I was a philosophy and psychology major, and somewhere in there, I just decided to take a Hebrew class, and stumbled into a PhD course as an undergraduate. And so they wouldn't let me drop it. I tried to drop it as soon as I realized that I did not belong in that class. And it was just a whim for me. I just thought it'd be really fun to study Hebrew, and was really interested in Jewish culture and history and the Hebrew scriptures. And so because of that, I've always had a real affinity for the Torah, for the law, for the prophets. And there's a story about King Jehoash and Elisha the prophet. That's at the end of Elisha's life. And he tells the king, you're going to have absolute victory. And then he tells him to do something unusual. Shoot your bow through the window, arrow through the window. So he shoots the arrow through the window. And then he says, now take the arrow and strike it. And the king strikes it 3 times and stops. Then Elisha tells us, gets angry and says, why did you stop striking? If you'd struck the arrow 5 or 6 times, you would have had a complete victory. Now, since I didn't grow up with the Bible, whenever I read something really weird or something that doesn't make any sense, I stop and go, what is this trying to teach us? And I realized what was going on here is that Elisha had a different framework for life than King Jehoash. King Jehoash stopped striking when he felt he'd done it enough. And Elisha saw that that was something inherent in his character, that he would quit before he was finished. And so he lost what was promised. He was told he would have a complete victory. He ends up with a partial victory. And I started asking myself, I wonder how many times in life we actually quit, but we think we failed. I wonder how many times in life we just stopped because it was too hard or it required too much discipline or it was the boring hard work of life, right? And so I wanted to unwrap the characteristics of people who just keep striking and striking and striking and never give up until the job's done.
How do we not quit? How do we keep moving forward? Where do we find the strength for that?
Well, I think there's a combination of things. We all have a limited amount of energy. And you, having been really a lifelong student of energy and an expert in energy, you know that no matter how much energy you have, no matter how much capacity you have, everyone has a limited amount of energy. So if you're using your energy to drag a broken past forward, if you're using your energy to drag, let's say, unforgiveness or bitterness or anger or envy or greed, if you're using all the energy, drag negative components of your soul into the future, you will not have the energy to create the life that you long for. And so a huge part of it is realizing that you're going to have to decide what material you're going to use to create your future with.
That simple.
Yeah.
And where do you get that energy from?
Well, one, I think that we're created by God with energy. I think that's one of the beautiful things is that, Einstein finally helped everyone understand that the Bible was always right.
Right.
that mass and energy are the same. It's just, in a sense, mass is just energy deciding how much energy it wants to spend. Because light is energy moving at full speed, and water is energy moving at a certain speed, and dirt is energy moving at a different speed. And what we need to realize is that we're created with energy, by energy, with energy. But the Bible actually has a different word for it too. It's called spirit. And that we human beings are created by spirit. And you can even see it in just everyday language and people, talking about someone losing his spirit. When an athlete or a soldier loses his spirit, when he's been defeated, overcome, when lost his confidence, his courage. And there's something about us that gets energized when we're doing something we're passionate about. We're energized when we do something that has meaning. We're energized when something gives us purpose and intention. And we lose energy when we feel like our lives don't matter. We lose energy when we're doing something we don't love. And so I know for me, every day there are things that steal energy from me. And every day there are things that seems to re-energize me.
Love it. So Erwin, when you wrote this book, you wrote a first draft and then something happened that made you reevaluate your life and you went back to it. Can you just share briefly about that?
Sure. When I wrote The Last Arrow, in many ways, I wrote this book as if it was the last book I would ever write. I mean, the very title, The Last Arrow. I wrote the book from the perspective of someone who's looking back at his life and he knows that he's facing death. And when I finished the manuscript and all I had left to do was to edit the book, it was December 15th of 2017. And I went to the doctor's office and they told me I had cancer and that I'd had it probably for up to 10 years and it had spread. And what could have been a really simple surgery now became a more dramatic situation for me. And so I didn't know if this would be my last Christmas, if it was the last time I'd ever get to buy my kids gifts and spend a Christmas with my wife, Kim. And it was just a really sobering moment. And the day they told me I had cancer, my family was just really torn up. And after they went to their own places, went to bed, I grabbed the manuscript and I opened up to, I think, the bottom of page 93. And I read a line I wrote a year earlier. And this is the line: "I need to tell you before you hear from someone else that I'm dying." I had written that a year before. And on the night they told me I had cancer, I read that line again. And I realized that it was almost as if I had a caplet, a time capsule that God had given me the words to write so I could read them to myself a year later. But the next line is the most important line. But after I say, "I need to tell you before you hear from someone else that I'm dying," I write, "But so are you." I think that's the key of the book, is that I wrote the book as if I were dying. And then when I had finished the book, I find out that I might be dying. And in the middle of that, I had to go back and edit the whole book. I wrote a new first chapter and I added something in the last chapter. But what I realized was that everything I wrote in that book, I believed even more. That I didn't have to change the contents of the book. I didn't have to change the narrative of the book. That the book is exactly what I would write. And so I made sure I finished the book. And I know it sounds kind of morose, but I made sure I finished it before I knew whether I would live or die. And I think that's why this book means so much to me, because I think it's a book that, written at the face of death, will actually call us to really live.
And it seems after the book's been out, you've been speaking on this book with such conviction. I've heard you talk about it. Did going through that near-death experience really ignite your conviction, strengthen it even more?
You know, what really, I think, deepened in me was how necessary this message is for other people. Because people started asking me questions like, well, did cancer change the way that you looked at life? I said, no, I've lived the life I've lived because I made those choices decades ago. And I was able to face cancer differently than people expected because I already dealt with these things so long ago. And what I really came to see is that the reason we're so afraid of death is because we're afraid to live. The reason we're afraid to die is because we're afraid to live. And once you've actually lived, you're not afraid to die. Because and I have a lot of friends who are atheists, and they'll say to me, Erwin, there's no proof of life after death. And I'll say, hey, look, the only proof of life after death is life before death. And if you just exist in this life, of course, you will never believe in an afterlife. But if you're alive, then you'll know that life is more powerful than death.
Wow. Yeah, folks, this book is incredible. I mean, can't tell you how powerful it is. It's like one of those books where you will read and you'll say, life changer. You give it to your kids, life changer. I mean, just really powerful book. Changes the way you view life, how you will live your life, as Erwin said. And his energy leaps off the page, his spirit. It ignites something in you to say, you know what? I'm not going to go through the motions anymore. I'm going to be bold and be courageous and create this life. Now, Erwin, you wrote this book. Before this book, you wrote a completely different kind of book. A book about imagination, about creativity. It shows the range and what's on your heart. But just tell folks who don't know about your other books. Tell them about this book, The Artisan Soul. Tell them about what that book's about. Just because I want people to understand, just from what you're sharing and the complete range of messages that you do share.
Sure. I spent about 5 years running McManus Studios, where we had 3 fashion brands. We had a film company. And we worked in the world of art, creativity, beauty, imagination. And I wanted to translate the principles that I applied in the world of art and creativity in the world of everyday life. I also wanted to answer, for me, a really important question. I've been a part of the TED community for around 10 years. I've heard some of the greatest thinkers, explorers, researchers, scientists in the world. And their focus oftentimes are on different species. And I started wondering, what makes humans different than every other species? What makes us uniquely human? And if I could figure out what makes us uniquely human, maybe I could understand what it means to be created in the image and likeness of God. So the whole argument of the artisan soul is that in the same way that bees create hives and ants create colonies, humans create futures. And one of the things we don't realize oftentimes is that what humans naturally do is create futures. Silkworms are not aware of what they do. I don't think honeybees are aware that they're creating honey. I think humans are creating futures, and we think they happen mysteriously or magically, and we're so superstitious. But the choices we make today create the future we live tomorrow. And then I think a lot of people of faith are afraid to say that because they think, oh no, only God creates the future. But the reality is that you're designed this way, that you're imagined to imagine, created to create. So one of the core themes of the artisan soul is that you're both a work of art and an artist at work. That what makes humans unique is that we can materialize the invisible. We imagine, we dream, we envision, we see in this imaginary world. And then we have this unique capacity of materializing what was in the invisible into the visible.
I love it. Now you lead a community called Mosaic.
Yeah.
How would you best describe what Mosaic is for others who have never been there?
Sure. We're on the corner of Hollywood Boulevard and La Brea. We have a couple other locations. That's sort of our epicenter right now. And I started Mosaic really in a nightclub that Prince used to own in downtown LA. And it was a kind of an underground community. And it was really only for my friends who did not believe in God, for people who were still trying to search for some meaning in life, for people who didn't trust the church, didn't trust religion, didn't trust institutional organizations, but really wanted to ask the deep questions of life. And, maybe my philosophical background, it was a part of the creation of Mosaic because I wanted to have a place where atheists and agnostics and Buddhists and Hindus and Muslims and Christians and Catholics, whoever you are, could come together and ask the important questions of life, not feeling that they're being judged because they're on a different journey. And for me, I had a life-changing encounter with Jesus Christ when I was in college. And I'll even say this at Mosaic now on Sunday. I'm still astonished that I believe. I just keep being baffled by how is it possible that I could actually believe in God and believe in Jesus and believe that life is found in him. And yet, John, I just have to shamelessly say that I can't even imagine life without Jesus now. I can't imagine life without the reality of who God is. And so I don't ever feel a need at Mosaic for us to try to impose anything on anyone. We're probably the most open community in the world. And we did a survey 2 Easters ago. We had over 1,000 atheists at Mosaic on Easter Sunday. I don't know what an atheist is doing there, but I'm so glad they're there. And that's what I love about a community. It's known for its artistry, its creativity, its imagination. But I also think Mosaic is known for its high thinking. And not that it's academic, that it's organic. It's asking the deep questions of life and trying to help everyone make sense of who we are.
In all transparency, I belong to Mosaic, so people need to know that. But I would describe it as a place of faith and love and hope.
That's
and a community where everyone feels like they belong. Like it doesn't matter what religion you are, people show up. And as you said, on Easter Sunday, you have atheists that are there, and yet they still feel like they belong there because everybody is loved. And so when I'm out in LA, that's where I go. That's where I really feel at home myself. So anyway, I just wanted to ask you about that. I think, again, it's a special place. Hope people check it out next time they're in LA. In terms of your own personal life, your own journey, I love to ask people this question. I want to ask you what's one defining moment in your life that made you who you are today?
Well, that's such a good question. And of course, I think you want me to make it a different moment than when I entrusted my life to Jesus Christ. But it really is the most defining moment of my life, because if you look at my life, I'm an immigrant from El Salvador. Spanish was my first language. I never knew my real father. For the first couple of years of my life, my grandparents raised me. Then my mom came back and got me. And I always had this deep sense of aloneness and disconnection. My mom remarried a guy involved in creative underground economy, so our life was pretty unstable. And
organized crime.
Yeah, and I was a straight D student, first through 12th grade. I couldn't get in college. I just worked as a lumberjack, carpenter, construction, cook, every minimum wage job. And then I begged my way into a college, and in the midst of that, began to have a really deep desire to make sense of my life. I didn't know I was searching for God. I just started studying philosophy. I read every philosopher from Socrates all the way forward. And and it didn't matter if it was Hume or Descartes or Locke. It didn't matter if it was, Aristotle or Plato. And I just couldn't make sense of what it means to be alive, to be human, to exist. And I had this overwhelming sense of angst in my life. And I thought in my mind, I'd studied Christianity, but I spent like 30 minutes on it because I didn't really consider it a viable option. And I don't even know how to explain this, because it is like having a great meal. You can't explain what you just tasted. You can just sort of hope you can invite someone to the same restaurant where they can take a taste for themselves. All I can tell you is that at first I wasn't really open to who God was, to who Jesus was. At first, I admired Jesus as a great teacher, a great person. But it's when I sort of opened myself up and said, all right, Jesus, if you're really God, if you're really out there, if you really want me and you can change my life, here I am. And so I still remember the day. I mean, it was August 20th, 1978. And in an evening time, I just took a huge leap of faith. And I didn't know anything about the Bible. I didn't know anything about God. I wish I'd said I did this massive study of all, the religions and Christianity. I didn't. It was sort of a desperate leap of, okay, if you're out there, I'm available. And it changed my life. And, it's hard to believe. I look back and I go, suddenly I'm a straight A student. I'm making the dean's list. I'm getting into, any place I want to go. My life changes dramatically. I become a writer. I end up becoming a futurist. And my wife and I both, she was an orphan, lived in a foster home from the age of 8 to 18. We used to sleep on the floor because we couldn't afford a bed. And we just shake our heads and go, who could have ever imagined this life? Who could have ever imagined that we could create so much good and so much beauty and live a life that's so fulfilling? So, Jon, for me, there is no question that the defining moment of my life, I feel like my life would have drifted into nothingness if I hadn't had a life-changing encounter with Jesus Christ.
I love that. And what I love about you is, and you and Kim, is that you did the work. You were working with the poor. You were working on the streets. You were living on nothing, just doing the work, sharing the message. And now, years later, you're leading this incredible community. You're one of the most influential pastors in the world. People need to know that. They may not know that, but you are. Wherever I go, wherever I speak, people of the Christian faith know about Erwin McManus. So it's amazing to see how God has used your life. And that leads us to the final question then. And what are you excited about as you go forward? I mean, you've accomplished so much. You've obviously, again, written this book, many other amazing books, The Barbarian Way, many others. What are you excited about going forward?
Well, probably the things that I would long for the most is I want to see my wife, Kim, fulfill her greatest dreams, to live up to her great potential, and to have, she's so passionate. She's all over the world. She works in Malawi and Bangladesh, and, helping young women find freedom from the sex trade, being educated, becoming leaders. And because there has to come a certain point in your life where it isn't just about what you accomplish. I want to see my daughter Mariah accomplish great things, and she's a musician. I want to see her art just touch the world. I want to see my son Aaron, them. I want him, to find his deep sense of intention and purpose, and to know that he matters, and that he has gifts and talents that the world desperately needs. And then honestly, for me, I've got a treatment that's being bounced around at a couple of major movie houses, and I've already I'm starting my next book called The Way of the Warrior. And
Nice.
and I have the first line. Here it is. And it says, the warrior is not ready for battle until he has come to know peace.
Wow.
And so that's how the book starts. And I'm going to try to write it this December. You're my inspiration. And you write a book every December. I'm going to try to write this book this December. And so I'm excited about that book and the impact it'll have, hopefully, on the world. Jon, I've lived a really rich life, and everything I ever dreamed to see happen has kind of like happened in my life. And so I just hope to keep dreaming bigger dreams and make a greater impact for good in the world. And that's my hope.
That's awesome. Final thoughts that you would love to share with people that we haven't shared thus far?
Well, one, I don't think we can end this time without talking about what an incredible human being Jon Gordon is and what an impact he's having all over this country. You say you don't talk much about your faith, but I don't know. I think you leak everywhere you go. And even when you don't talk about your faith talks about you. People are so inspired and encouraged. They find hope and meaning. And most people who are fairly intuitive go, there's something going on in this man's life that is bigger than just him. And so I just hope you write another 20, 30 books. And I hope you have 10 more New York Times or Wall Street, bestsellers. And because the world needs people like you. The world needs your hope, your encouragement. That's the thing I want to share is that I think the reason you've prospered so much, the reason that you've had so much impact is that you're living your life to serve other people. And that's why for me, it's an honor both to know you and to be your friend. You're one of the handful of people I truly consider a friend.
Well, that means the world to me because without you, there's no me. So you're part of my story, and I'm thankful to be part of your story. So this means the world. Thanks, Erwin. Where can people read about you, find out more about you, talk about YouTube and all the great videos you have on there?
Awesome. No, thanks so much. One, you can go to Barnes and Nobles or Amazon and pick up my books. I think I have like 9 or 10 different books over the years that are out there. But I would just pick up The Last Arrow and The Artisan Soul. They're the 2 most recent. I also have 2 podcasts. We have the Mosaic podcast that comes out every week and on our iTunes and channel. And my son and I started a new podcast called Battle Ready with Erwin McManus. And I'm getting feedback from all over the world that people like that podcast better than my speaking. So, but we just did one on resilience that really had a huge effect. We did one on mental health, and the impact on that one already has been really significant. And you'll like this. We did one on ROIs, return on investments. And if you take that concept and move it out of finances and move into human relationships, how would you make sure you got a proper return on investments?
Wow.
And so we've had some really, really good podcasts. I just encourage everyone to join our Battle Ready with Erwin McManus podcast. It's actually Erwin McManus and Aaron McManus. My son refuses to put his name on there.
You know what? His gifts, by the way, he is a leader. He is an incredible leader. He has the gift of leadership. There's no doubt about that.
Hey, thank you so much. That's encouraging. I'll let him know that. Well, maybe.
Hopefully he sees this and hears those words because he is a leader. Well, Erwin, thank you so much. Keep changing the world, keep making a difference, and we'll look forward to the Power Positive Summit, and hopefully we'll see you there as well.
Awesome, and happy holidays and a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.